Through you, Mr. Chair, it is 4 p.m. and I will begin the meeting with the opening land acknowledgement statement. We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land we gather on is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people. Through you, Mr. Chair, you may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Sarah. First of all, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining the first meeting of 2022 of the Town of Pelham Committee of Adjustment. I would like to begin. This is an electronic hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present and viewing from home will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please address your comments and questions through the chair. This is a public meeting and has been called to satisfy the requirements of the Planning Act and Council bylaws. Notice of this meeting has been given by prepaid first-class mail to all persons listed as owners in the last revised assessment rule within 60 meters, 200 feet, of the subject properties. In addition, a public notice sign has been posted on the lands and information has been provided on the Town's Committee of Adjustment webpage. Agencies on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed should the application be approved. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given the opportunity to address the application. Any person concerned with the application will then be given an opportunity to participate in the meeting. If you have pre-registered to speak during the public portion of the application, you will be brought into the Zoom meeting and will be unmuted. Please state your name and mailing address for the record. Please be advised, once you have finished speaking, you will be removed from the Zoom meeting room. If you are live streaming at home and wish to submit a comment during the application, you may do so by emailing clerks@pelham.ca. At the conclusion of the public portion of the meeting, these comments will be read into the record. If you submit comments after the public portion has been closed, your comments will not be considered at the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Specific wording for the conditions will be determined by the committee following the public portion of this hearing. Copies of the decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. If you wish to be provided a copy of the decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. The Secretary Treasurer's contact information is available on the upcoming PowerPoint presentation and is available on the town's website. Any person, corporation, or public body has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision for a minor variance and within 20 days of the mailing of the decision for consent applications. This meeting is being conducted by Zoom webinar and is also being live streamed on the town's YouTube channel. You may wish to put your view on the gallery view by clicking the top right corner from the speaker view. We ask that you are mindful of background noise for the duration of the meeting. Committee members are asked to mute their microphones until you are asked to speak. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak and also vote by raising your hand. Please note that attendees who have registered will remain in the waiting room via telephone or electronically until their application of interest is brought to the committee. Those participating online via Zoom will be asked by the chair to raise their virtual hand when they wish to speak. On a computer, you can do so by clicking on Participants in the bottom center of the screen and then by clicking Raise Hand. On a mobile device, you can tap Raise Hand in the bottom left corner. You will then be called upon to speak. Your microphone will be unmuted by staff and you are participating by phone, you will be unmuted by staff when the agenda item that you have registered for is being discussed. Applicants, agents, and attendants are advised that they are free to leave the webinar once a decision has been made. Today's panel includes Mr. Bernie Law.
Good afternoon.
And, Mrs. Sandra Marsh.
Hello.
And I'm acting as chairman, and I am Don Cook. Members of the panel, do we have any members of pecuniary interest in accordance with the Conflict of Interest Act in any of the applications to be considered at this hearing?
I do not, sir.
And I have none.
And neither do I. Assistant Secretary Treasurer, have there been any requests for withdrawal or adjournment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there has not.
In that case, we will proceed with the first application of today, which is an application, hang on a second here. Application A, 2022P. The subject lands at 42 Philomori Boulevard in the town of Pelham. There are two minor variances being requested. One to reduce the interior side yard to 1.9 meters, where the bylaw requires 3. And the second part of the application is a minimum rear yard. Want to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 15 meters to 11.8 meters. Assistant Secretary, could you please read excerpts from the planning report?
Yes, absolutely. I would just ask Ms. Miller to please share our presentation. Committee of Adjustment hearing. All Town of Pelham in-person Committee of Adjustment hearings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all Committee of Adjustment hearings electronically via Zoom. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Participants are reminded, please ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you will be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you will be removed from the meeting. Participants will remain in the waiting room until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by the committee, your microphone will be muted. Once voting on the item has taken place, participants will be removed from the meeting completely. You may resume viewing the meeting via live stream. The Zoom chat is not being monitored, nor is recommended to contact the clerk's department during this meeting. Please contact us via email at clerks@pelham.ca. This email address is being monitored during the public portion of the meeting. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, and this means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you will be given an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please use the clerks@pelham.ca email address. Please note all comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will also not be tolerated. Please note that if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons will be asked to leave. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given the opportunity to speak to the committee during the public portion of the meeting. Please note, after all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the applicant or agent will have the opportunity to address the public comments and at one time. Application A1/2022P. The subject land is located on the north side of Philmori, lying east of Joyce Crescent, known municipally as 42 Philmori Boulevard in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application seeks relief from Bylaw 3325, 2012. Minimum interior side yard to permit a minimum interior side yard of 1.9 meters, whereas the bylaw requires 3 meters, as well as minimum rear yard to permit a minimum rear yard of 11.8 meters, whereas the bylaw requires 15 meters. To date, the following comments have been received. From the building department, a permit is required for the proposed covered rear deck. Public Works Department. The developer should be made aware that there is an existing stormwater management easement located along the northern limits of the property as shown on the submitted plans. Municipal easements are required to protect and ensure access to the municipal infrastructure located on the subject property. The developer should be made aware that no development will be allowed on the easement, with the exception of minor landscaping, restricted to lower type vegetation, no large trees, in order to maintain access to an easement in perpetuity. The applicant is to ensure that 1 meter offset from the side yard lot line remain free and clear of all encumbrances for swales and drainage purposes. It is the responsibility of the owner/developer to pave the driveway apron within 1 year of occupancy being granted. At future development application stages, the Town of Pelham will require a stormwater management brief outlining where the runoff will be directed and calculations showing that the existing infiltration trenches can accommodate the additional runoff. Staff require that the additional runoff will not negatively affect the embankments at the rear of the property, as well as C condition. Niagara Region, no objection, C condition. We did receive 4 public comments, and they are summarized as follows. The existing subdivision puts emphasis on the larger lot size and permissible footprints of houses to preserve escarpment habitat and crowding of houses with sufficient side and backyard setbacks. 3 meters side yard setback was intended to keep escarpment view visible from the road. A reduced side yard setback will change the symmetry and value of adjacent homes in line and also obstruct escarpment view by reducing space between houses. No objection to the rear yard setback. The reduced interior side yard setback will break the symmetry of adjacent houses, as the reduced distance will partially block the view to the tree line of the escarpment, and worried that own house will appear smaller without the spacious side yards. The value of owned property could potentially be negatively impacted. Public comments continued. Would like a revised plan to respect the side yard setback to allow green space in the rear yards to be viewed for the tree-lined properties. Believes it is oversized and would spoil the look of the street. No objection to the reduced rear yard setback. Concerned that the view of the escarpment will be obstructed. Felt that the size of the lots and the spacing between the houses gives an exclusive feel to the subdivision as compared to other municipalities and subdivisions within the Niagara region. Is the variance minor in nature? With respect to interior side yard setback, the reduction is not too large overall and will not result in negative impacts to the adjacent neighborhood in terms of additional shade potential, privacy, spacing, and openness, stormwater runoff concern, and the availability of amenity space. The view corridors into the escarpment along roadway and between the buildings from the sidewalk, which situates on the other side of the street, will largely be unaffected, and the viewing opportunity is preserved with minimal disruption given that the standard height and massing of the building. The building can minimize the visual impact through its white brick exterior and contrasting roof and cladding materials. With respect to rear yard setback, the reduction is relatively minimal and will not result in negative impacts to the adjacent natural heritage features, as well as the neighborhood at large. The proposed encroachment will have minimal impact while the edge management planting is sufficient in meeting the regional and town requirements. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? With respect to the interior side yard setback, yes, as it will allow for the creation of a reasonably sized dwelling on a large vacant residential lot within the delineated built boundary of the Font Hill urban settlement area. The reduced side yard setback will be negligible in terms of resulting impacts and would appear indistinguishable from a streetscape perspective. It mostly follows the existing pattern of the development in adjacent areas, with the exception of a slight encroachment into the side yard, which will not be discernible from the public realm perspective. With respect to the rear yard setback, the reduction will facilitate a less disruptive structure rather than building a foundation, which will likely result in higher levels of impacts. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? The variances maintain the policy intent of the official plan as they allow for a modest, compatible building in an existing neighborhood within the delineated built boundary. It will add to the existing housing supply, support infrastructure maintenance, and make more efficient use of the large existing vacant residential lot. The minor reduction in side and rear yard setback will not negatively impact the character of the neighborhood nor disrupt the existing streetscape, but instead help create a form of diversification to the existing neighborhood. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the ZBA as the proposed building will largely follow the zone requirements with minimal modifications. The spacing of the houses are marginally varied, while the privacy, density, built form, and character are fundamentally in keeping with the surrounding neighborhood and would not incur incompatibility. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development principles and makes efficient use of the land and infrastructure, and should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with regards to land use incompatibility, traffic, privacy, view corridor, and stormwater runoff. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the PPS and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application number A1/2022P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant submit an overall lot grading and drainage plan to demonstrate that the drainage does not negatively impact nor rely on neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Apply for and receive all necessary permits prior to construction commencing. Address the following to the satisfaction of the Niagara region: that the edge management planting plan dated August 18th, 2021 be implemented on the subject property. If the town requires this plan to be revised, it shall be submitted for review and approval of the Niagara region prior to implementation. And that the owner install permanent fencing along the rear property line without a gate to prohibit access from the subject property to the abutting regional core natural heritage system features. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Holly Wilford, Secretary Treasurer to the Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, LOS 1EO, hwilford@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website.
Thank you, Sarah. Representatives, you wish to make any further comments to the committee?
Yes, I would just ask Ms. Miller to please bring in the applicants, Mr. Vertanian and Mr. Ganyu of Mountain View Homes.
Mr. Ganyu.
Good day. Can you hear me?
Hi, how are you doing, Ken?
Good, thanks.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Matt. And he's Ken, or he's Ken and I'm Matt?
No, not today. Yes, Ken, do you have any further comments you wish to make after Sarah's reading of the planning report?
Okay, so what we did was we saw the comments from the public and we prepared a bit of a presentation should we think that might make people in the neighborhood feel a little more comfortable. But we're certainly in agreement with all of the conditions of approval recommended by staff. And we wouldn't have any problem implementing those, as we've already prepared to deal with those conditions up front.
Okay, so Ken, you want to proceed with your presentation? I noticed we had some sketches attached to our agenda.
Okay, this is, we're looking for a couple of minor variants: interior side yard setbacks, one on each side, plus the rear yard setback.
Everyone can see this okay, the presentation?
Yes, I'm good. Any
Okay.
members of the committee?
I believe we can, thank you.
Okay, this is the location of the lot within the subdivision. It's the very last lot to have a house constructed on it. It's owned by Mountain View Homes, and we are looking for a permit to construct a house for one of the employees at Mountain View. The side yard setbacks, we're looking for 1.9 meters to accommodate a building footprint on the lot, instead of 3 meters on each side. and also 11.8 meters to accommodate a rear covered deck and stairs as opposed to the 15-meter requirement. These are the locations. We've shown the house here on the lot and the garage and the rear deck. And you can see on each side where the 2 side yard setback variances are proposed and the rear yard setback. To give you a little better view of that, here we have, you can see the house shown in white, and we've highlighted in gray where the proposed variances would be in effect. You can see that just on the west side of the house, there's all along the west side of the house, there's an area that we're looking for the variance. And on the east side of the house, it's just the front corner of the garage, which is 1 story. In the back, you can see the shaded area where the rear covered deck would be within that setback area. You can see that on both those diagrams from different angles. This is what the house would look like from the rear, the top right corner drawing. That's what the house would look like from the rear. You can see the 2 decks above grade, and you can the bottom drawing is the house, the view of the house from the street. The materials and color selections have not yet been made for the house. That would be decided with the owner and the architect at the time of prior to building permit. This is another angle of the view of the house from the rear. You can see on the drawing on the left, if you look at the right side of the house on the drawing on the left, you can see that there's only the center portion of the house is a 2-story, and the front portion of the house is a 1-story, and the back portion is a 1-story, but has a basement walkout. With regards to the rear yard setback, there was a concern of staff at the region and municipality with regards to taking care of the swale and the drainage in the backyard. So we had an edge management plan prepared by Beam Environmental to propose plantings and provide a buffer with additional protection of the environmental feature at the rear of the property. This would assist in complementing the landscaping back there, and also to prevent against any kind of building encroachment getting too close to the top of the bank. We also had a stormwater management plan done by Jason Schooley, who's the professional engineer at Upper Canada Consultants. And that was an assessment contemplating the proposed building with the existing stormwater management measures, and concluded that infiltration would be adequate to accommodate the storm drainage systems of the house. And what I'd like to point out here as well is that the house is only 34% building coverage. Now, when the subdivision was designed, it was designed for houses of 40% coverage and more. So the house that's being proposed is actually less coverage and less impervious surfaces due to the size of the proposed house being planned. With regards to massing, this is a blow up of the site plan. The drawing on the left shows the proposed house in white, and the drawing on the right shows the ultimate house that could be built on the property in accordance with the existing zoning requirements. So that you can see that the house on the left, which is proposed, is only 34% lot coverage, when the zoning actually allows a 40% coverage as shown on the house on the right. Here's another view of the massing. The top right-hand corner drawing shows the red areas, which is where the existing zoning would permit a house to be constructed. And the bottom drawing as well illustrates that in addition to that. And what you can see is that the footprint of the house being proposed is actually less than what the zoning bylaw allows. With regards to massing and the appearance of the house from the street, the proposed house is the drawing on the left. And that is within the variances of the bylaw. The height of that house is much less than what could ultimately be built in accordance with the existing zoning. So the house on the right shows a hugely massed house, which is allowed by the existing zoning, but the proposed house is contoured in such a way where it would have less of an impact on the streetscape. This is an overhead projection, which shows the existing houses in the neighborhood. Now this aerial photo was done before completion of the subdivision, but the houses still give you an idea of where this house sits in relation to the existing homes. And you can see by the aerial photograph, the left side or west side of the house lines up with the house abutting to the west. And it actually jogs back to line up more closely with the house on the east side. So there's still lots of views between the houses for people to see the escarpment and for space and light and airflow. So the proposed variances actually comply with the policies of the official plan and enhances the environmental area because we're actually instilling some landscape enhancements which will complement the escarpment. It maintains the spirit and intent of the zoning bylaw because we actually have reduced coverage from what is actually allowed, less building massing than which is allowed, and it's a desirable site plan that was designed specifically to fit on this lot and be compatible within the neighborhood. As pointed out by planning staff, the variances are minor in scale, and we would submit that the variances are desirable for appropriate use of the lot for residential purposes and also for environmental enhancement. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer.
Okay. Mr. Law, do you have any questions?
If I could just ask you to stop sharing your screen, please. Excellent, thank you.
Okay. I think maybe you better, are the pre-registered participants, I noticed we have one pre-registered, Mr. Iqbal Khan, listed on the agenda. I'm wondering if he can be brought in so that he may...
Yes, absolutely. Ms. Miller, could you please bring our first public pre-registered member of the public into the meeting, Mr. Khan? Hello, Mr. Khan. We do see that you're in the meeting. If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, and you may proceed with your comment.
Hello.
Could you please state your name and your address, Mr. Khan, for the record?
I'm Iqbal Khan. I'm 40 Philmori, and this is lot 114. Sorry, I'm lot 115.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and it was well prepared by gentlemen from Mountain View. Just giving a little bit of background that I'm one of the residents who was involved in the whole evolution of this subdivision, and I was at several meetings when the plans were changed at least 3 times before we came to this final conclusion. The city came to this final conclusion that what should be the lot size, what should be the space between the houses. And there was obviously some resistance at that time because this land was relatively expensive, as we can understand, and everybody wanted to build the biggest house possible. And the space between the houses was more than usual what is required by the city. But at that time, the point was that we don't want to build what the maximum can be built on these lots, but we want to build particularly on these tree-lined lots, the kind of model houses, that was the sentence used at that time in the meeting. And we want to leave the space between the houses for obvious reasons, that we don't want to do overcrowding, we don't want to block the escarpment, and also the variance on the back was so strictly imposed that we were not even allowed to build any covered structure or deck in our backyards. And as you see on any of these lots, there is no deck you will see in the backyard due to all those reasons. So yes, house can be built on whatever is allowed according to the law. And the gentleman said that it can be 40% coverage and they are doing 34%. You can build 40%. I have no objection to that. As long as you're following the rules, what city laid for everybody when this planning was being finalized. This would be unfair that if you come to build the house on the last available lot, when everybody else has already built it, and come up with a new plan which does not match with the rest of the residences. This will, you already see on your slides that you have shown that this is it's a turn, and the house is already like encroaching. The front left side of the house is facing towards me, and it's already getting close to the house, and you would like to reduce that space further, and that is not going to help anybody. And it not only this house will look different, but it will make everybody else look differently. And I think this will change the whole impression of the residences. Secondly, coming to the rear variance, I believe the application is for extending, as far as the deck is concerned, it will stay in the allowed premises, but the stairs will extend beyond it. Is that correct? It's only the required extension or variance is only for the stairs, not the deck itself. Because if the whole deck is extending beyond, and this variance is applied for the whole deck, that will again compromise the privacy on the backyards for both houses, the house on lot 114 and lot 115. If the deck stays within the allowed premises, that is fine. If it is only for the stairs, I have no objection to that. But if the whole deck is extending beyond, and the application is for the variance for the whole deck, that will again interfere with the privacy on the backyards for both of these houses. So in my opinion, the house should be built where it is allowed, and it should not change the whole landscape.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. Mr. Gandhi, do you have any comments you wish to make?
Is it possible for us to share our screen just one more moment?
Sure. I will allow that.
Okay, with regards to the comments about the rear deck or rear porches, you can see the drawing on the right side. The shaded area is the only area affected by the variances. And it's the bottom part of the steps, and it's the back part of the deck. Now, if you look at that in relation to the properties on either side, it doesn't project any farther back into the yards than the neighbors' homes do. So there won't be any impact on viewing anybody's rear yards from the deck. The deck will be looking straight out into the environmental area to the north. The house is also jogged a little bit, where if you look at the drawing on the left, you can see that it is only the very front corner of the one-story garage that is projecting into that setback. The rest of the house is actually angled way past what the existing zoning allows. So there's actually, although that we have a little tiny bit of the garage in the front encroaching into the side yard, the rest of the side of the house is farther from the side yard setback than is already allowed by the zoning bylaw. So there really is no impact on the adjacent house to the east whatsoever.
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you're right. When you're looking at the house from the front, anybody passing on the street is looking the front edge of the house that you are mentioning. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. No, when you're on the front, you're not looking on the back of the house. You're looking on the front of the house. What is obvious is that very edge that you're mentioning about.
Well, the house is still set back at the required setback requirements in terms of the front. The house is being specifically designed so that it steps from your house to the west up to in front of Mr. Spackman's house, or what used to be Mr. Spackman's house to the west. So the house is designed specifically to fit the rather awkward angles of the lot and still maintain space, light, and air between the dwellings. So people across the street, if they're looking through there, they're still going to see between the houses. And especially at that one pinch point where the garage is, it's only a one-story garage. So that is going to be, you'll be looking over top of that to the trees in behind.
Well, yeah, but it still changes from that edge by what you are suggesting. It changes from 3 meter to 1.9 meter, the space, the inside yard that you are talking about. Exactly, that is my point. It's not only the edge, it will change the whole footprint of the house by doing what you are applying for.
Okay. But if you look at this drawing, I'm not sure. Can you see that?
Yes, I do.
Whatever's shown, what's shown on the drawing to the right, which is what's permitted by the existing zoning, that is more, that type of building would carry more mass and density than the building on the left. Because the building on the left, as I pointed out before with regards to these setbacks or these building heights have less of an impact on the property. What's shown on the right side of this drawing, the 2-story part of the house at the back, that's well within the zoning requirements already. The only pinch point that we are looking for a variance on the east side of the house is where the garage is at the very front, and that is the 1-story garage. So the rest of the house has no more impact than what is already permitted by the existing zoning on the east side.
Yeah, that's okay. I got your point, but we are talking about the both sides of the house. And again, I'll come to the same point that it is not what's on the back, it's what on the front that is obvious from the street when you're looking at the symmetry of the houses. And you're planning to change this on both sides. So obviously there is a significant, there will be significant impact on the front of the house when you're looking at it from the street and you're looking at the adjacent houses.
Can you see this drawing, which I just put up on the screen? That's the 2 front elevations. The house on the right is what's permitted by the existing zoning, which carries a lot of mass. The house on the left, which is proposed, has been sculptured so it has less of an impact, even though it's a little closer to the lot lines. it has less of a bearing on the streetscape because of the massing of the design of the house.
Well, sir, I cannot stop you from building what is allowed. That is totally in your on your discretion, what you would like to build, what's allowed. That's your right to do that. I'm saying that what is important to us, and I think I have cleared myself on that.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think we're stuck on something, and I don't think it's going to go away. Mr. Khan, you have your opinion. Mr. Gunn, you have your opinion. I did check. I looked at all information that came with our agenda package. I've looked at page 27, which is the basically one of the slides that Mr. Gunn you pulled up. It was called Massing Proposed Building Footprint in White versus Current Permit. I agree. What is shown on page 27 of our agenda is that the setbacks are shown. Yes, part of the covered porch is definitely going to be required. It needs a reduced rear yard setback, particularly with the stairway, and the side yard setback on the what would be the east side needs to be included to the 1.9 versus the 3. This is something that the owner of the property wishes to have amended as part of the zoning bylaw to allow him to build the house that he wishes. You may disagree. Mr. Gagnon is working for his client, who probably wants to have the house built in accordance with the sketch that came with the original application. Basically, we've listened to both your arguments, and we will take those under consideration when we come to our decision. So thank you very much, both of you, for adding more information to members of the committee. I'm next going to ask the Assistant Secretary Treasurer, have any comments been received, or is there anyone else from the public wishing to comment on this application before we close the public portion of the meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just ask Ms. Miller to please remove our current public speaker. We have not had any other pre-registered members of the public, but I will just confirm with the clerks@pelham.ca email address. Through you, Mr. Chair, it is 4:42, and we have not received any emails. Therefore, you can close the public portion of the meeting and move to committee input.
Could I have a motion to close the public portion of the meeting? Mrs. Marsh moves, seconded by Member Law. All in favor of closing the public portion of the meeting? Raise your hand. All in favor. Thank you very much. We've closed the public portion of the meeting. Do any members of the committee have questions of the applicant? Mrs. Marsh.
Through the chair, I want to thank town staff and the developer applicant for both their presentations, very well written. This is specific to Ken Gagnon. So there were suggested conditions imposed through Niagara Region, one being the edge management plan to be implemented, and that the permanent fencing without a gate be installed along the rear. Just for clarification, the easement runs along the back of the property. So the fencing, the permanent fencing would be behind the easement, is that correct? And then the edge management plan would be prior to that. So there, just logically, if there was ever some work that needs to be done on the easement, that would disrupt the edge management plan. Like, how would they get to that easement without disrupting the edge management plan?
It would, can you hear me? Yes, they would be,
Yes.
They would get permission from the owner to go into the backyard. And if
Okay.
there was any issue with regards to getting through the edge management landscaping, they would just cut a space for access into it, and then the owner would replace it at a later date.
Oh, okay, and I guess further to that question then, is that then the owner's responsibility if they needed access to the easement further, like down the road, would then the owner be responsible for replanting in accordance with the edge management plan, or is that something that the town would go in and do?
Well, the town would ask for permission, and as a condition of their going through to deal with any potential issues back there, it would require the owners to reinstate it.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can just continue to point out, that fence would be permitted or put along the rear lot line, then the swale, then the edge management plan, and then there's still lots of space in the backyard between the edge management plan and the back of the deck.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Law.
Yes, I have a short question for Mr. Gagnon. It's the, in the front of the building, from the garage to the neighbor to the right, you say it's 1.9 meters from the foundation over? Because as I look at the picture, I see the roof line. How does the roof line impact that 1.9 meters?
Roof line, the eaves are permitted encroachments into setbacks. So if there's a variance permitted, it allows the eave to project farther into there.
I see. Well, it's important. I think it's a lovely plan. The home is suited for this lot quite nicely. However, as a member of the Committee of Adjustments, it's important to me to recognize how these minor variances affect the surrounding neighbors. I've read in detail the 4 letters enclosed from Mr. Khan, Mr. and Mrs. Visible Gonzalez, Mr. Karen, and an unidentified individual. Of the letters that were concerned about the interior side yard setbacks, the last letter informed us that when we built our home with Mountain View, we asked for variances and extensions to our side elevation, including a bump out for windows. However, we were always told by Mountain View they do not allow bylaw variances. We had to design and go with what was acceptable within the guidelines given. We did not have the luxury to customize that what we wanted. So we think it's unfair that these variances be allowed, as our modifications were never even considered. Therefore, I believe a precedent has been set for all the homes in this housing development survey with respect to the bylaw requirements of 3 meters, interior side yard minimum. So I truly believe that after reading this data, and it's all the neighbors around this particular home already have the 3 meter setback of all of their homes. So I find it difficult for me after reading these letters to make this change. Therefore, I'm not able to approve this application for side yard minor variance. I respect the 3 meter variance on both sides of the house and draw the building to fit the lot. Thank you.
Mr. Gagnon.
With regards to the comments made about varying from the house designs in the subdivision, there was architectural controls implemented whereby Mountain View, for all the houses that Mountain View built, had to conform with the architectural requirements of the subdivision. And so that's what I think that the other area residents were, or one resident anyway, was referring to in that regard. With respect to the little corner of the garage that projects into the east side yard, what we might be able to do to alleviate the concern about a big eave overhanging closer towards the lot line, we could be willing to reduce any overhang there to say 8 inches rather than what is shown on the drawings. And that might alleviate the getting closer to the lot line.
I think my concern is the 3 meters view of the forest in the back on both sides of the house. All of the homes have got a 3 meter setback, and you can see through. It's not a real tight subdivision like we have elsewhere in the town. This is a beautiful subdivision with big homes, big lots, and there's room between these homes. And I don't think it's fair that we should implement changes now at this stage of the game with the last lot on the street. So I'm still with 3 meters both sides. Because when I looked at you on the left side of the house, I'm not sure, you've got a line down the yard. It just looks like, I'm not certain if that line includes the addition to bring the house over to 1.9 meters on the left side. Or
The aerial photograph shows the actual foundation of the house in relation to the lot lines.
Yes, but it's in white, right?
Oh, do you see the drawing that's up there now?
No, I don't see it right now.
Well, we'll just flash it up for a second if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah. See, there's a black line on the left side of the proposed 2-story Kennedy residence. On the left side, there's a black line goes right down through the white color of the home.
Right. What we're showing there is what the setback requirement is, and we're showing the proposed variance. So the white part that's between the lot line and that line is what we're applying for in the variance.
Yeah, that's what I see. Okay, I understand that. I don't think that 1.9 is enough space on that house, on that lot. I think 3 meters is respectable.
Were there any concerns expressed by the neighbor to the west? When Mrs. Kennedy was contemplating making the application, she went and visited the neighbors and talked to everyone that she could get a hold of there, and no one seemed to have any concerns, which is why she went to the expense of then hiring an architect to design the house. And then also Mr. Spackman, who I understand is no longer there, he's moved on, but there was no concern expressed by the property owner to the west.
Mr. Gagnon, maybe we should ask Mr. Khan. Is Mr. Khan still in the meeting?
I think Mr. Khan's on the right side.
Through you,
Where's Mr. Khan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are no longer in the public portion of the meeting, and therefore Mr. Khan has been removed.
Mr. Khan's Mr. Khan's property is on the right side.
Okay, thank you.
I understand what you're saying is you really don't like the idea of reducing either side yard setback, left or right.
Okay, I'll stick with that.
Okay. We've heard from Sandra Marsh. Okay, I have some comments too. And maybe Mr. Gagnon, I'm kind of this guy that worries about the drainage. And I did read the letter from Upper Canada dated October 26th. And I have one question. I noticed in the comment, each gallery, this is but the second bullet on the first page regarding stormwater management measures included direct connections and roof water leaders, and I like that idea. Each gallery is connected to the roadway storm sewer via rear yard catch basin leads or storm sewer laterals for individual front yard galleries. Could you tell me or let me know the basically, I guess this infiltration trench drains along, eventually reaches a catch basin. Where's the catch basin that serves this particular section, which is referenced as some drainage areas 10 and 34 in the drawing, drainage plan number 11. I think he somewhere states that it serves 4 lots between 112 and 115, which is 40 to 46 Pelham. Do you know offhand where the catch basin is The only reason I ask is if the catch basin is in this particular lot,
Through you,
I
Mr.
would have
Chair.
difficulty agreeing to the reduction in the side yard setback on either side of the property.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the catch basin is in the adjacent lot 115.
It's in 115. Okay. That's a very important thing when I'm considering this particular reduction in the side yard variance, because 3 meters is 10 feet. And if you have to get a little piece of equipment in to do something, particularly look after a catch basin, it's going to be tight. I know there are many excavators that are capable, but it becomes a considerable cost. The second part of that, I noticed in reading the comments of the Public Works Department, I have to find them now. I've got them here somewhere. It's something about future development, and I'm not sure how that comment impacts on this particular item. Mr. Young, can you kind of enlighten me on this one?
Let me see.
Where is it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is related to the building permit application, not to the minor variance. It was just to give the proponent a heads up that there will be possible future requirements regarding to the stormwater once the final grading plan is submitted.
So this would be more or less to the final grading plan of the overall subdivision, or
no, for the
individual lot.
Yeah, well, because the individual lot will be draining to the infiltration trench and also to the road, we need to ensure that it all complies with the overall subdivision agreement.
Okay, so in reality, we are asking that they do a detailed lot drainage plan for this particular lot. That is one of the conditions that I noticed was being requested to be imposed.
Yes.
Okay. I have no difficulty with that at all. In fact, that's the one condition that I actually really agree with. There's something else that I was worried about too when I was looking at this. Okay, let me go through. I'm having some, thanks, Mr. Young, you're relieved. I have some difficulty with some of the wording, particularly looking at the wording in the minor variance tests, number 2 or number 1. The variance is minor in nature. I'm not a planner, and I'm looking at a sentence that starts the view corridors into the escarpment along the roadway and between the buildings from the sidewalk, which situates on the other side of the street, will largely be unaffected and viewing opportunities preserved with minimal disruption given the standard height and massing of the building. Despite being a somewhat bulkier built form than adjacent units, the building can minimize. Could you please put this into some form of simple English language? What are you trying to say, Mr. Ing? Or Mrs. Weems, please tell me what you're trying to say, because I really am losing it with this verbiage here.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can I just answer to your question?
Yeah. What are you really trying to say to me?
I think this sentence particularly speaks to the preservation of viewing opportunity from the sidewalk, which is obviously situated on the other side of the street. Perhaps I could have reworded it better.
Why didn't you just put it in simple language so that people like Bernie and I can understand it easily? Okay, and the second sentence is, despite being a somewhat bulkier built form than adjacent units, the building can minimize the visual impact through its white brick. Are we sure that these are the materials going to be used for this house?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So these are obviously based on the plan submitted. And that's why the comments were made based on what's submitted.
See, I looked at the sketches that came with the original application and I saw lots of white. But do we actually have a building permit being requested currently that kind of gives us colors and schemes? Because when I looked at the existing development in that area, I did not see any white-faced structures. I saw lots of beautiful stone-faced structures, various colors of wood. I have difficulty with that type of a sentence being in this particular report. Okay, so that's one thing. Maybe you have supplied me an answer. Maybe the word should be worded slightly different, but that's fine. Okay. The variance is desirable for the number 2 is reasonably sized dwelling in a large vacant. Well, of course, it's vacant residential. It will be delineated in boundary the urban settlement area. That's fine. I can agree with that. I have difficulty supporting infrastructure maintenance and if you reduce the side yard setback, basically you're making it more difficult to get any infrastructure in the backyard. So you may want to think about that too. With regard to, oh yeah, there was one other comment. We've got a plan that's going to put some shrubbery, I guess, on the south side of the drainage gallery that runs across the back of the property. Will any of these plants that are being planted eventually have rooting within or extend into the basic, I think it's kind of like a French drain? Would this be a detrimental impact on the operation of the French drain? Mr. Gagne, could you enlighten me on this?
The landscape plan was done by an environmental scientist / landscaper. And in order to implement the thought process of the province, of the region and the province, and typically what would happen is the landscape plan would be approved by planning staff and public works staff. So if there was any kinds of plants that had roots which would not be appropriate to be next to the drainage area, then we would work that out with the Public Works Department to make sure that there was no adverse effects.
Like I said, I did notice in the Public Works comments on this, they said there'd be no trees planted in that particular area. And basically, I assume because they also don't want any of the root structure to end up in the what I really think is more like a French drain, seeing it's going across the back of the property and basically goes to the catch basin in 115. Okay. With that being said, I also have some difficulties with the conditions that are being requested by the various departments. I have no difficulty with the Public Works Department wanting an overall lot drainage plan. I have addressed, okay, one condition is address the following to the satisfaction of the region. The edge management planning plan prepared by Beek and be implemented on the subject property. If the town requires, I have no difficulty, but I have difficulty with the idea that it be implemented on the subject property. Would it not be better that the developer prepare an undertaking to the town attached to the building permit application? I will be doing these things, which would include, if there's a problem or revision to the plan, I will be submitting it to the town, and the town, of course, will then submit it to the region for approval. I'd also like, we're talking about the installation of permanent fencing along the rear property line. To me, that should be part of that undertaking as part of the building process. I will be undertaking the installation of within a certain period of time. We have had in the past where things in the building permit have lingered on and they have not been done and they have caused a concern. So I could see there being kind of an attachment to the building permit. I will be doing this within a certain period of the issuance of the occupancy permit. Could that be done? We're talking
Mr.
about
Chair,
the apron.
if I might clarify
Yes.
to you, the purpose of the conditions being written the way they are is that without the conditions being satisfied, the zoning variance isn't approved. And so it won't be possible to get a building permit without those conditions being implemented. So it basically requires that those conditions are completed prior to issuance of a building permit, the way that it's
Issue
currently
the building
written.
permit. Okay, he can't do some of those things prior to the issuance of the building permit. That's why I'm saying he cannot put the apron in. Why don't you request an undertaking, which is attached to the building permit? It outlines what he will be doing to satisfy these conditions.
Well, the installation of the fence and the installation of the plantings can be completed prior to the issuance of the building permit.
But not prior to actually completing the final lot grading of the lot. You do not put plantings in until your lot is graded properly. That's my concern. That, and you won't be putting the fence in until you get the rear yard graded to the lot requirements of the lot grading plan. That's why it becomes an undertaking. I will do these things.
Yeah, the desire was to tie the conditions to the zoning so that if at some point those conditions, the fence is removed, a gate is added, or the planting strip is removed, then at that point the property would no longer be in compliance with the zoning.
Those items will actually show on as part of the building permit.
Correct.
We have an undertaking that he will make sure that these installations are completed, say within a certain period of time following the issuance of the occupancy permit. It's just something you may wish to consider, that's all. I'm having difficulty from my point of view making sure that these items are covered off, and my secretary treasurer is certifying to the building department that, yeah, well, hold it. You know, like, anyway, I will leave it with you with that. Are there any other comments from members of the committee?
Through the chair.
Yes, Mr. Long.
The location of this home is, of course, at the bottom of the hill. And in Pelham, we have a lot of water with rainstorms and so on. And it's quite an issue throughout the village or throughout the town. However, I would like to know what is the end result of the water that comes down from the golf course up on top, all the way down, and it's going to go to a stormwater catch basin. But then what?
Okay, Bernie, at the intersection of, I think there's a stormwater management pond at the corner of Buckley. Is it Buckley? Ken, help me.
Yeah.
I think it's Buckley and Philomori.
Yeah.
And I believe that the water in that stormwater management pond then goes under Hay Street and through the lands of the National Trust, which is actually part of the headwaters of the 12 Mile Creek.
So are you saying the water in this particular part of the survey is going to go south to that pond?
Yeah, the storm sewer system kind of jiggy jogs around and follows a street pattern, and I think it ends up in the pond at Buckley and Philomori. I think I've got the right streets. I haven't got the plan of subdivision in front of me at the moment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's at the intersection of Brewerton and Haste. Okay,
Brewerton and Haste. It was empty today when I went by and had a look. Usually there's water in it. The kids are skating on it if there's ice, but. Okay, you know where you are, Bernie?
Well, like we're next to the golf course, this particular property.
It's down. It's well below the. It's well below the golf course.
So it's well below the pond.
The golf.
This property drains into that pond.
The golf course does not drain through the subdivision at all.
Yeah.
What I was,
Course drains basically to the north naturally
Oh.
through the fairways.
So the water from the pond then drains down into the St. Johns Valley.
Correct.
Yeah, eventually.
Mm-hmm.
There's a creek behind my house, Bernie. Somehow it gets over there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes easterly through basically along what used to be the old railway track, the old NS&T railway track.
You're right.
The gravel pit.
You're right.
Okay. It ends up back behind what was Adam Schroer's apartment buildings.
That's right.
Okay, you got it now?
I do.
Okay. Problem solved?
No. Because when I was a kid living in, we had trout in the stream when I was a kid down there at St. John's.
There was trout in the stream when I moved here 50 years ago too.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I make a point of clarification.
Okay, Ken.
When a subdivision is under study for development, when the engineers are doing the stormwater management design, they have to assure that the post-development runoff, meaning after you build all the roads and sidewalks and impervious surfaces and houses and patios and swimming pools, the runoff from all of the new development cannot exceed what was pre-development runoff. So whatever was running off the site 20 or 30 years ago, that has to be maintained. So in order to do that, you create a stormwater pond. It catches all the water from the impervious surfaces. It holds it, and it only allows it to enter the creek system at the same rate it did before development was started. So there shouldn't be any negative impacts on the creek system or the drainage system in the entire town for a new subdivision. That's why you see all these ponds all over the new subdivisions.
And guess what? There are very few ponds on the west side because that whole area was developed long before we started building stormwater management ponds.
Yeah.
There are 2 or 3 down off Short Hill Place that I'm aware of, and and of course there's the big one at Rice Road, Highway 20. But and all through East Font Hill, there's 2 or 3 stormwater management ponds. In any event, members of the committee, are we ready to render a decision on this particular application, on these applications? If we are, could I have a mover and a seconder with regard to the application?
Through the chair. Sorry, Mr. Cook.
Mrs. Marsh, yes.
I just have a further comment to a comment that you made, and I apologize for not jumping in earlier. You made a comment about reducing the side yard from 3 meters to 1.9 meters, and there would be difficulty getting the machinery in through the back in case that easement at the back ever had to be have some maintenance work on there. However, I mean, we understand that the 3 meter requirement at this point, which would be 3 meters for both lots, making 6 meters total, is much larger than in most developments, if I'm not mistaken. So, and in most developments, I believe we have smaller machinery, and we would still have, the developer is still required to go in and, do maintenance if required on rear easements. That's just a point that, although maybe the larger machine might be more suitable for the job, I'm sure that there are still smaller types of machineries that can still get to the back without maybe as much disruption.
Yes, I agree with you. The problem is, if somebody builds a fence, the 2 property owners build a fence on the property line, we don't have a nice wide swath. We generally end up with something like 4 feet wide. It's very difficult. A 4 foot wide or a 6 foot wide machine going through a 4 foot space is really tough. In this particular case, this is why I asked where the location of the catch basin was. The catch basin is to me the hardest point, that if it had to be fixed or repaired, that would be it. The reduction of the side yards on this property should not affect the entrance of equipment. And because it is basically, there's not a pipe system in the rear yard. It's like, to me, it's like a French drain. I think they gave a picture of it, and it's something so deep and then it's so wide and it's filled full of gravel. So to me, that's to me, that's kind of like a French drain. Water's going to flow through. Eventually, it's going to build up to a certain elevation, and that's going to have an overflow that goes into the catch basin. If the catch basin has a problem, this lot, it's not on this particular lot, so there shouldn't be a maintenance problem that way. Okay, it's on the lot to the east, lot 115, which Mr. Young. So that's why I don't like reducing side yard setbacks, but in this particular case, I don't see an adverse impact. Okay.
Thank you.
From a maintenance and construction point of view, okay? That's I'm coming from that point of view. So with that being said, now are we ready to render a decision? And if so, can I have a mover and a seconder? Mrs. Marsh?
I will move that file A1 2022P 42 Fillmore Street in Pelham, application for minor variance for a minimum interior side yard of 1.9 meters on the east and west side, and the minimum rear yard of 11.8 meters be granted for the following reasons. Variances are minor in nature. There's no negative impact to adjacent neighborhoods or adjacent natural heritage features. The intent of the zoning bylaws maintained. The intent of the official plan is maintained. The proposers are desirable for the land as it will allow for the creation of a dwelling on a large vacant lot, facilitates construction of a covered deck, which is less disruptive structure and will have no negative impact. The application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham, and that the Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation that this application meet the Planning Act test for minor variance. The applicant's aware of the existing stormwater management easement. The applicant is aware that the 1 meter offset from the side yard lot line remains free and clear of all encumbrances for swales and drainage purposes. And the applicant is aware that the driveway apron must be paved 1 year after occupation. Following conditions: building permits to the satisfaction of the chief building official and prior to the building permit, but to the satisfaction of the director of public works, that an overall grading plan and drainage plan be entered into, and to the satisfaction of the Niagara region, that the edge management plan be implemented, and that a permanent fencing without a gate be installed along the rear yard. Your rear yard.
Thank you, Mrs. Marsh. Do I have a seconder? The chairman will have to second the motion. Thank you. All in favor of granting of the variances? Carried. My only concern is related to it says the condition prior to the building permit that the edge management plan be implemented. That may be difficult, and that the perimeter fencing without a gate be installed along the rear lot line. I think that doing that prior to the building permit may be difficult for the applicant. Mr. Gagnon, are you happy with what's happened?
We're very happy with that. And one of the things I didn't actually have a chance to say is that the grading permit that's issued has a fee that goes along with it, and the fee doesn't get returned to the applicant until the lot grading plan, and in this case, which would include the fence and the landscape enhancement plan, that would all have to be done before the grading deposit is returned to the owner.
Oh, that's something I did not understand. Thank you very much for that clarification, Mr. Gagnon. I feel a lot better. And with that, that is the end of our applications for tonight. We have no applications for consent. We have no minutes of previous meetings. Could I therefore have a motion to adjourn the committee meeting? Moved by Mr. Law, seconded by Mrs. Marsh, that we adjourn this particular meeting of the Committee of Adjustment of the Town of Pelham. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and see you next month.
Thank you very much.
Bye for now.
Thank you.